Hi, welcome to Chad Silversmithing. First, thanks for coming to my channel. I appreciate you visiting. If you'd make sure to hit the like button before you leave, that helps YouTube find my channel and spread it around so other people can find me. I appreciate it if you do that. While you're there, you might consider checking out some of my other videos too. There's quite a few here. I've got over 160 videos, quite a bit of content for both beginner, intermediate, and people who are a little more advanced, just looking for some interesting ideas. So. Before we get started on the project, though, I do want to thank my subscribers here on YouTube. I've just about to pass 3,700, which is amazing and wonderful. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. I also have a growing group over on Patreon. I wanted to thank them for their support. They're paying for my premium content. Things like discounts on jewelry, exclusive tutorials. If you're interested in that, check it out. There's links to that in my video description down below. There's also links to buy me a coffee, another way to support me on the channel. If you want to buy some merch, there's cool things down there. And even my website where you can buy some of the jewelry. Like if you look behind me, there's oftentimes you see pieces of jewelry. Most of those are for sale. So check it out. Now that I've done all that promotion, let's talk about today's topic. I really like making chain bracelets for some reason. I always have. And I think it's because you can make up your own unique links that are all different from any other one you've ever seen. And that's kind of fun for me because you can always come up with something you've never seen before. So today I'm going to do one that's kind of a little bit Art Deco-ish, I think. I drew up some pictures of what I want the links to look like. We'll give it a try and see how it works. It's going to be not a super complex project. It may take a little bit of precision soldering in spots. I think I'll end it off with a little bit of a box clasp that tries to incorporate the design of the link into it so that it's hard to see where the clasp is. I like to do that on my bracelets. So let's get started on that. Okay, this is one of the things you can find in my merch store, these little idea books. I like them because they have, it's not really graph paper, but it's got dots in every corner of where graph paper would normally be, so it makes getting things symmetrical really much easier for me. Plus you don't have the distraction of the lines of graph paper, so I didn't realize how useful it would be to have a little book to sketch some ideas in there. So this is the basic link I'm going to do. I think this was the first one I drew, and I drew this to scale, kind of how I wanted it to be. So it's got kind of a shield shape with a bar going up the middle. The bar goes up the middle because you don't want these links moving around too much, otherwise the bracelet can get twisted a little bit on your wrist. And then for the next set of links, they'd be facing the other way. So the two loops facing these two loops here. And then the back end on that one would be like this, and so on and so forth. I think I'm going to make a box clasp, just a kind of a short box clasp, but then I'm going to extend this basic shape at the end of it like that, so that it looks just like one of the links, or pretty close to one of the links. It'll be a little bit wider right in this area, right here. But it'll make it relatively concealed when someone just glances at your wrist. It'll be hard to find the clasp. So let's make some of these links. I'll probably show you how to make one or two of them and make the rest of them off camera because it's going to take a while. And then I'll show you how to make the box clasp on this one as well. I measured these. I figured out how long these should be. And they're about 70 millimeters. So, and then what I did was I cut a strip of paper that's 70 millimeters. You can see a mark right there. Where I'm going to need to bend them inwards, or thereabouts, pretty close. So, and then this should be just long enough to be a little bit too long to do this, so that I have enough to cut off. So I make it just the size that I want. So, cut a few pieces of square wire. This is, the materials we're going to use. 14 gauge square wire for the basic piece here. I'm going to use 14 gauge round for the rings, and also these rings here, I think. For the box itself, I'll probably use 22 gauge sheet, and everything else will be the same materials that we already talked about. The type of solder that I use in pretty much everything is hard sheet solder. I use a spray-on flux called My-T-Flux, and it looks like I need to fill up my flux bottle. Probably do that before we get started, but let's start bending these pieces at the right spots and everything. If I'm just going to kind of eyeball center it, but then I'm going to use my marker to make a mark where I need to make some. If I'm going to make a sharp bend in wire like this, where it's relatively sharp, and I don't want to do it made out of two pieces, if I want to actually just bend it there, but get a pretty sharp bend. If I put a notch there, use the 45 off of if I use the edge of the file right here on the corner, and just file kind of a 45-degree notch in there, it makes it easier to bend a steeper angle there. So let's make marks about where those go. Then I'm going to use the file, like I said, to create a little 45-degree notch there. I'm not going to go all the way through. Go maybe halfway through. I don't know if you can see that up there. I hope I got it in the right spot. We'll do the same thing over here. Oops. Getting a little overzealous. Now when I go to bend these inwards, I'm going to get a pretty sharp corner. So then if I put a little bit of solder there and solder it closed, then it'll be a nice sharp bend. Much better than you can get if you just try and bend it. So. One of my patrons over on Patreon suggested that I share a little bit more about myself. I think that's not a terrible idea. I haven't mostly made the focus of the channel making jewelry, but I suppose it's relevant to the channel how I learned to do that and things like that. I'm in Colorado, and I grew up here mostly. At least from the time I was in about second grade. And I went to school to become a teacher in the late 80s. And got a job in 1991-ish teaching language arts at a local alternative school. And I taught there for almost 30 years. 28 actually. And I decided to do this more full time before I got too grouchy and old to be a teacher. Not that there aren't very many teachers who are old who are not grouchy. You'll notice I made a second one. Okay, so it looks to me like the way I drew it starts to kind of bend in right about there. So I'm going to kind of try to keep that size right there. See if we can get the bend to start going right about there. So I'm going to try and isolate the bend. I'm just keeping it like... You ever watch my other videos? Square wire is challenging in that it always tries to twist on you a little bit to find an easier way to bend. So you got to kind of correct that as you go when you're bending square wire. These two I'm going to overlap, I think. It needs to be a little stumpier. Now we're starting to get in the right range. I suppose you could build some kind of a jig to make these all exactly the same, but if I have a drawing I can use that kind of as the template and keep making them over and over again. But I think I could just cut it at the angle where it meets there, but I'm going to cut it straight up and down right in the center of where those two meet, and then file both of them a little bit, and then solder them together so we get a nice neat seam. Cut it kind of at an angle here like this with these. And same way on this one here. Pull them open that way a little bit, then I can file it straight up the center, I think. See if we can't get a nice neat solder joint there. That's kind of what I was looking for. Alright, so now I need that bar that goes up the middle. Let me find some square wire. I'm just going to cut myself a chunk off here so I don't have to have this big piece flopping around. Okay, so it's just basically going to go up the center here. So one side I can cut pretty flat. But when I first started doing the YouTube channel, everybody freaked about me filing in the air in front of me. I brace it against things when I really need to, but most of the time I don't need to. So scandalous. Alright, so I need it to kind of come to a point in here. Kind of like that. So I can probably cut it at a little angle. Save myself some filing on both sides. If it's too tight, it'll try and push this open, so that's what I'm trying to avoid. Alright, I think that one looks pretty good. So I'm going to solder that together. Now, look, I'm going to have some little loops here. And I'm also going to be making rings that connect them together, but I think I found something that looks like it'll make loops about the right size. So I'm going to use this little brass rod. You could use a bail making pliers or your round nose pliers or whatever, but I'm going to take some 14 gauge round and make some circles so I can cut semicircles from them. The tool pile is getting bigger and bigger. Okay. I'm just going to grab this like this. Get started. Oops. First ring is going to not be good. Look at that though, they should be pretty tight against there. I'm going to go ahead and keep making rings on this because I'm going to need some to hook them all together, so I might as well. These guys are cut flush on one side, or relatively flush, so I can usually just make sure to keep track of where I cut it. Cut off half circles pretty well, or pretty close to how I want them to be. Then like that, then on one on the other side. So it only cuts flat on one side, so I'm going to have to flip it around and snip off this little bevel that I just made here. You could, if you wanted to, use a saw and cut these all with a saw. They make all sorts of jump ring cutting systems, but that has not been my experience that you really need all of those. It's long enough. Maybe this one's a little too long. Either way, I'll probably file the ends a little bit. So I'm going to solder those two on there like that. Some of these I'm going to cut off as just regular rings though. Let's make sure they're big enough to do this. And does it have enough room for the other ones? Yeah, I think so. It'll work. Okay. Well, I never really finished telling you how I got into this and stuff. So in the mid-90s, maybe four or 5 years into teaching, I was feeling like I had no artistic outlet. I really realized I needed one, but there was no finished product that you could look at and say, I did that when you were done with your workday. The kids would graduate and move on. Sometimes you'd see them again, sometimes you wouldn't. You hoped you had some kind of a positive influence in their life, but there's nothing very concrete, and sometimes it's nice to have a concrete product to look at and feel proud of. And so I think I was searching for a while to find that, and I found a guy teaching some classes in metalsmithing, and so I signed up. Okay, so those are going to go like that. Alright, now I'm going to cut off a few of these things just to make sure we can solder them all together. Basically, it's going to be sets of two, because these ones will be back to back with a ring in each one of these. So here and here, and then here and here, but it'll be connected this way, this one, and this will be over here. So it'll be in like pairs, kind of. See if the actual product ends up looking that way. Sometimes you envision something and then when you start to put it together it doesn't really looking the way you envisioned. And then I'll keep the heat kind of going like this, so it doesn't really get the rest of it hot. And theoretically, we should be able to solder it. I'm going to flux this without squirting it right on my computer in front of me there, which you guys can't see. The other thing about doing it with the third hand here is the third hand soaks up a lot of heat. Sometimes makes it hard to get things to flow. See if things are still moving around. So we got those together. Like I said, I'll do a little filing to clean these up. But I'm going to make a whole bunch of links now. Well, not a whole bunch, but 6 or 8 probably. We'll see when it starts to get close to the size I think it needs to be. Did one of my wife's bracelets, link bracelets that fits her nicely. And it was 7 to 7.5 inches. They're meant to be a little bit loose around your wrist, so I think that's a reasonable size goal to go for. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the camera and make a whole bunch of links. Okay, well that didn't seem like much time to you probably. But I got, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 links. I think the 10th link I'm going to make is going to be my box clasp. So, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a piece of square wire. Let's make the box first. The box has to be about the same width as this. So, it also needs to have a little depth to it. So if I do this, let's see, here's one. If I double that and then add a little bit more depth than this creates, that should give me a good size, I think. So let's see, we got, it's about 17. Yeah, that's right, 17. So let's go another 17. That would be right about here. And then probably 2 millimeters on each side up. So let's go 3 just to give ourselves a little bit of space. So that's 6 more millimeters. That's about right there. Okay. So I think first I need to get this a little straighter. It's pretty crooked. This is 22 gauge sterling sheet, by the way. I guess it doesn't matter too much because I'm just going to use it to describe a line. never done a box clasp. I made a video a while back. I'll put a link up there if you want to see it. It's got a few different varieties of box clasps you can do. In fact, here's one of them that I did for this video. And I'm going to do a variation of this one where it's hopefully a little tighter than this one. But it's got a little V thing that's kind of springy. It's got a little button on top. It pops into there and catches on a little lip that's along the top of that. And if you want to open it, you push the button down and it slides out. So hopefully I can make it a little neater than this one was. I guess we'll see. I think in order to get a nice box, it might be easier to get a good solder joint if I do it like I do a ring band. I'm just going to make a little U out of it. You can always shape it into the box shape after we're done. And this will allow me to get the two ends nice and lined up. This is one of those things I do that's different than some people. So as tempting as it might be to put that solder joint on the corner of the box here, that is not a good idea because it's going to be harder to bend there and you'll have one corner that looks different than everything else. So what I'm going to do though is I'm going to start squishing this way and putting the solder joint on the bottom. I have a feeling this is going to be way too thick, so I might have to cut some out. But let's go ahead and get it shaped. That's about the width of it, I think. This will also allow me to get these narrower. Piece of this stuff that is folded in half on itself that fits in there so I can get it to catch on there. So it needs to be about twice that long. So if you look at this one, it's got a piece of sheet folded in half like there with a little button on top. And like I said, that catches on a little knot, or it catches on the lip that's right on here. So we need to cut a slot in our little box that we created. And then And then we'll add a lip on there so that the little bent piece of sheet can catch on it. This is going to go in there though. Wow, I cut that pretty nice. Alright, so we got that line scribed in the center, pretty close anyway. I'm going to try and get this to bend just slightly, right on that line there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try and get this to bend at center point, you know, pretty far down. And then I'm going to actually pound it flat so it's doubled over. The real tricky part is getting them back apart again. See how that's going to fit in there. But I want to solder on a little. If you look at this, it's shorter on the top than on the bottom, so one of these has got to be cut a little bit shorter. I guess I need to spread it out a little bit more. So there's going to be a back on this side, and this one needs to be short enough where it fits completely inside of the box. So, I'm thinking if we cut it right about there. Okay, so now we got it shorter on one side than the other. I'm going to file that a little flat. And that should fit inside of there. So, we need to solder that little thing on the top there. Okay, so let me find a little piece of square wire. I think I might use only 12 gauge, so it'll be a little bit bigger button. So I'm actually gonna cut a longer piece than I need, and then I'll snip it off size-wise. So let's cut that. Finally nice and flat. I think what I'll do is I'll sweat a little bit of solder on here, and then I'll just plop this down on there while it's hot. I usually would tumble it overnight to get, you know, clean up in the nooks and crannies a little bit. And that'll get you a nice kind of shiny finish, although it won't remove scratches. So I usually do a combination of polishing on the wheel as well as tumbling. I think today, for time's sake, I'm just going to polish it on the wheel. But please take note that polishing chains, bracelets, things like that on the wheel that are links, if they get caught in the wheel, they can yank your hand in or ruin the bracelet or worse. So please, you know, until you've had some experience, probably don't do it that way, okay? It's got pearl bracelet there. I should be able to, as soon as I get this piece up to temperature. Having done that, we'll make this a little squishy and less springy for the moment, which is okay. We need to measure where the little button is going to line up. So just put it in there part of the way where my marker go. So I can make a mark. Big. And it's going to have to go back. I want to have room for that thing to go all the way in there so it snaps into place. So I need to cut this out of here. And probably what I'll do is I will use these guys and snip out the front end here. This is bad behavior. I'm using wire cutters in order to cut a slot in a sheet. Don't tell anybody. Okay. It just bent and broke off, which is good. Didn't even have to cut it off. Okay, now I'm going to take the, let's stick this in here. Just got to go far enough back for that thing for this piece to be behind this right here. So, and that looks like it is. The only thing I'm going to do is, before I get too much further, if I can get this back out of here, clean this up with the file and the Dremel. Okay, for the back of it, just gonna, oops, that's solder, it's not sheet. Just going to use some more of the 22 gauge here. And I'll just cut a piece big enough for that to sit on, then we'll solder it right down. So we got the back on. I just need to trim that off a little bit. Do that next. Just file down the excess. Okay, so next step is going to be to put just a little tiny lip on the top of this. So I'll probably just use some of that 26 gauge sheet again. I think I got it a little deeper that time. Hopefully we got a good solder joint. I'll clean that up and we'll take a look. Okay, what are we doing now? Okay, now it's so tight it's going to be hard to get it in there, so I'm going to have to find a happy medium. So I might have to use the Dremel in order to gently remove some of this, so I'll be right back. Okay, I think I got it to where it'll work. I may need to do a little fine tuning, but once I have everything assembled, I'll make this little spring here by bending it back and forth a little so it automatically springs up, and then it should be able to slide out of there. But I may need to do this just a tiny bit less, thinner there. We'll see. But you got to figure out how this is all going to assemble. So in order to make this look like one of these, you have to, like I said, it's not going to look perfect, but we'll just have a little bit of square wire coming off of it like that. Now I can hook this onto here with that. So I'm going to have to solder, I think, a piece of square wire along here, and then solder some jump rings onto it that I can clip over the end of this, or over that. I think it needs to be a little bit shorter than this, though. All right. I'm going to use a little of this 12 gauge for this part. Give me just a little bigger piece of wire to solder the jump rings to. So I should be able to just solder like that. This still looks very straight. Okay, so I think if I sweat a little solder onto here, then just butt it up against there, that'll be the least chance we'll screw anything up, probably. I guess we'll find out. just solder it on there like that. Should be able to just hook them over this now. Solder them closed. Theoretically. So I believe, with the exception of pickling and doing some dremeling and then polishing, we're done. So I will let that pickle for a while, come back and I'll show you what it looks like all polished. Polished up, clasp closes. Came out pretty nice, I think. The only thing I might change is this gives just a little bit too much range of motion here, and when you put them like this, those can fall this way, and then the thing gets kind of messed up. So next time I might design it so that it has, you know, blocked in space so it can't go around the sides, but I think most times when you're wearing it, it'll be fine. You know? So overall, I'm very pleased. I think it came out pretty nice. I think the box clasp, see how it kind of like merges in. It's hard. It's less visible because it's got part of the component as design. So, all right. I'll take some better pictures and put them at the end. Okay, well that was the Art Deco-ish looking chain bracelet. I hope you enjoyed that one. If you did, make sure to hit the like button. I really appreciate that. Check out some of my other videos. I have over 160 here. They're split up into playlists too. If you haven't discovered that yet, that's really handy, especially if you're a beginner and you want to know which projects are appropriate for you. Check out the beginner playlist. That should help you to figure out which projects you can do at the skill level that you're at. Don't forget to hit the video description for some of the relevant links, including my merch store, my website, my Patreon site, buy me a coffee if you just want to give me a tip. Those things are all great and help me out a great deal. So again, thanks for watching. I really appreciate you coming and visiting. I hope you got something out of it. Leave some comments in the comments section. I love to have discussions with people about things. Thanks for watching. Happy silversmithing.